Yeah. 901 Shelby Drive, look alive, look alive. Came up on this side, now they on the other side. Oh well, them dog, we gon' see how hard they ride.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your lead writer and host, Christian Fowler. With me, as always, my co-host, former Memphis Tiger, Trey Draper. Today, we'll start the show off by talking about the Memphis and Navy game. We'll look over that a little bit, and then we'll preview the Memphis versus Georgia State game that's coming up this week.
Secondly, we'll get into the visits, the in-home visits, and the official visits of the two super studs that we have coming in R.J. Hampton and Jalen Green. And we'll also interview our special guest this week is someone that's near and dear to my heart. He's the reason that I'm able to sit in this chair. He's the reason I was able to go to the University of Memphis. Like I said, I'm named after him. That's my grandfather, Leonard Draper Sr. He'll give us as much in-depth, any type of story that you want, you can get it from him about Tiger basketball.
Then we'll go back into our prep segment that we've done for the past 2 weeks. I'll highlight a player. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also talk a little bit about the Whitehaven and Lausanne game. That was a thriller that happened this Friday. That was the game we highlighted last week. Obviously lived up to expectations. And then we'll get into some questions and answers, and that'll wrap it up for this week. First up on the show today, I want to recap the Memphis versus Navy game from Saturday. Obviously, it was a tough game. Memphis couldn't come out with a victory, but I just kind of want to get into it a little bit. So on the defensive side of the ball, personally, I think Memphis played a magnificent game. They still allowed a good 250 yards rushing and 22 points, but they played their hearts out. They were on the field for 42 minutes, time of possession. Navy had the ball for 42 minutes, and any defense that has to be on the field that long, that's obviously very difficult. But they flew around to the ball, they gang tackled. They had a lot of bright spots on defense, so obviously it's looking up on that side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, in a rainy game, ball control is difficult. Obviously, Memphis had a problem with turnovers. They turned the ball over 4 times, albeit one was on pretty much a Hail Mary at the end of the half. So they had 3 fumbles, and really the first play of the game started off that way. So it started off as a pretty sloppy game, but Darrell Henderson really brought the team together, really brought the offense together. On the day, he had 13 carries, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he was pretty much unstoppable. I mean, when you're averaging 16.3 yards a carry, against a typically stout run defense, that's very impressive. The offensive line looked incredible as they have the first 2 games, and we kind of knew coming into the season as they returned 4 or 5 starters that the offensive line has a lot of talent on it, has a lot of experience on it, and they really shined Saturday afternoon against Navy. They were opening holes all night. Brady White didn't have the best of games, but he was still protected very well by the offensive line all game. I know the CBS broadcasters pointed to multiple times that Brady White his ankle was rolled up in practice last week, so that might have been a factor. The weather also might have been a factor, and people can't forget it was only his second game as a Memphis Tiger. He was at Arizona State for 2 years, but he didn't play a ton. So it's still only his second game. Riley Ferguson had rough games, obviously. Paxton Lynch had rough games, obviously. So the fan base just needs to stick to Brady White. He still had a magical first game. He still has a ton of talent. There's still a ton of talent on that side of the ball. So even though Brady had a difficult game, I think it's imperative for fans to stick behind him and let him know that one game's not going to push everybody away. So he'll be looking to bounce back this week against Georgia State. So with that difficult loss now in the rearview mirror, they'll move on to Georgia State Friday night. Georgia State's in the Sun Belt Conference. They've got a pretty solid team. Not a team to look past, but if Memphis comes in and they handle their business, they're a team that Memphis could get up on. They started out, I think, as a 22.5-point favorite, and they're up to 26 points now. So obviously Memphis has the more talented team in this one. So really, what I'll be looking for in this one is for first off Brady White to get back in a groove. We just spoke a little bit about how he had a pretty rough game in the conditions against Navy, but this is definitely a game where he can bounce back. This year, Georgia State's allowing a little over 300 yards passing per game. Last week, they played NC State, and Ryan Finley had about 350 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this secondary has some holes in them. I know they have a very young secondary, so I think Brady White can really get back on track this week. He really didn't get on target with his receivers, so that's a big thing to look for this week. If he can get DeMonte Coxey involved early, John Pop Williams involved early, then he can see some success early on. Get comfortable in the game. If he starts off with some screens and some easy passes to get himself comfortable, I think you will be able to see them, spread the ball downfield, put the ball downfield, and then also in the backfield just for those guys to kind of continue carrying the load. Like I said, Darrell Henderson's had a terrific season so far. Memphis is averaging 268 rushing yards a game through 2 games, so that'll be, this will be another game to lean on those running backs and let them have big games. Patrick Taylor, after having a great week 1, didn't have the best game against Navy. I'm sure he'll be hungry to bounce back this week. Also, the tight ends to get a little more involved. We haven't seen Sean Dykes and Joey Magnifico as much as I thought we would, but I'm sure that's just a part of integrating a new offense or a new quarterback in the system with Brady White. So the more the season progresses, I'm sure we'll see them a little bit more. And then also just, look for this offensive line to continue to be dominant. Georgia State is pretty stout in run defense, but I don't see many people stopping this run game with this offensive line and the talented running backs that the Tigers have. So on the offensive side of the ball, Georgia State's, they've got some really good athletes. At quarterback, they have junior college transfer from Itawamba, Dantarius Ellington, who is a very dynamic athlete. He's a pass-first guy. He definitely wants to throw the ball first, but when he takes off and runs, he's special on the ground. In the receiving core, Penny Hart, who is an incredible receiver. He's an all-Sun Belt player. Last season, he went, I think, about 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. So he's a guy the Tigers will have to hone in on. In the running back, they have 7 backs on scholarship. In their first game against Kennesaw State, I think they played 5 running backs. Last week against NC State, they played 4 running backs. So the Tigers are going to have to be prepared for a multitude of different looks on the offensive side of the ball. Travis Trickett, who is Georgia State's offensive coordinator, is really going to try to spread you out, throw some screens, and then get the zone read working, and then work it to Penny Hart on the outside. So those are a few things that the Memphis defense will have to highlight this week. Obviously, I know the coaching staff's got them watching a ton of film on those guys, so they'll be prepared. But to touch on the defense a little bit for Memphis, I talked about how well I thought they played against Navy, and I think we've really seen an improved unit so far. I think there's standouts literally on every level. All 3 levels of this defense, you've got standouts. On the defensive line, Jonathan Wilson has played incredible to me so far, and O'Brien Goodson has been that anchor in the middle. And the linebacking core has been outstanding. You've got Keith Brown, Tim Hart, J.J. Russell, Curtis Akins, Austin Hall plays, outside linebacker and safety, Jackson Dillon. I mean, they've been loaded at that spot. Bryce Huff has also played very well. But to me, Jackson Dillon has been so impressive after not playing last year and getting granted his 6th-year medical red shirt. He's come out and he's brought a different energy and a different feel to this defense. He's all over the field. Last week against Navy, he lined up with his hand in the dirt and was playing a little bit of defensive line, and he was also playing a little outside linebacker. So to have a guy that's that dynamic and can do that many things, I mean, he's a massive guy at 6'6", 265 pounds, but to be that dynamic for just 1 week to go put your hand in the dirt and play defensive line is difficult for anybody. But Jackson pulled it off, and he had an incredible game last week. Then you get in the secondary, and T.J. Carter and Tito Wyndham are both very, very good corners. But T.J. Carter is just, I mean, he's something that Memphis hasn't had in the secondary in forever. He's a guy that I personally think is the best defensive back in the AAC, and next year he'll have the opportunity to be one of the best defensive backs in the country. First game, he gets the pick six, 35-yard pick six. That's how he starts the season. He actually graded out, according to Pro Football Focus, as the #1 defensive player in the AAC, which Ed Oliver plays in the AAC. So that's very impressive. And then last week he was making tackles all over the place. For a corner to come up and stick their nose in the business and be making tackles all over the place is something that is rare nowadays. But TJ definitely does everything. He's a dynamic athlete. He's a lockdown corner. He's not afraid to tackle. He can play press. He can play zone. So TJ's awesome, and he's proved that he could build on an amazing freshman season so far this year. And then safeties have played well. They have a rotation back there with Tyrese Lindsey, Josh Perry, and a couple other guys back there that play a lot. Sanchez Blake. So that's been an impressive group. Londre Thomas has also played a lot since switching over from corner. So your safeties have looked good, and to me, possibly one of the best players so far on the defense that's not getting a ton of credit is Austin Hall. I touched on him a little bit, but in that Navy game, Austin Hall was all over the place. I believe he had 7 tackles overall and 4 tackles for loss. He's just a very intelligent athlete. He was all over the field. He knew what Navy was trying to do before they were doing it. He just played an amazing game, and that's a guy who's looked really good so far this season. Now we'll introduce a very special guest who was kind enough to take some time out and come sit with us for a minute, and that is Mr. Leonard Draper Sr., who is the grandfather of my co-host, Trey Draper. So we'll check out an amazing interview between Trey and Mr. Draper.
Today we have a very, very special guest who's, near and dear to my heart, who I'm named after, who pretty much has been very, very influential in my life, and it's my grandfather. He can introduce himself, and I'll take it from there.
My name is Leonard Draper Sr. I'm happy to sit here with my grandson to do this little interview with him. He's very special to me, not only having my namesake, but us both being big Tiger fans.
First and foremost, talk about, how did you get involved? Because a lot of people they want to ask me, how did you get involved with the University of Memphis, and how did you become to bleed blue? How did that happen?
Well, it started out having organized the first summer basketball league in the city of Memphis at the old Gaston Community Center, where I took the African-American kids and the white kids from Kingsbury, Overton, Treadwell, and Coast Southside with Coach Bill Kaler. And I put 3 kids off each school on the same team. We had 2 nights a week high school athletes, and then 2 nights a week we had college athletes, and we had some of the greatest college basketball players in the Mid-South area during that time. And Coach, at that time at Memphis State University, Coach Mo Ibo was the head basketball coach. And he came in to visit the league a couple of times, and he saw the kind of athletes that were in there, and he said, well, let me ask you a question. He came along with Coach Charlie Carbonero, who later became the athletic director at Memphis, and he asked if I would be willing to help them recruit some African-American athletes. I said, yes, I'd do what I could. So that led to me becoming involved with the University of Memphis, and that's when Larry Finch was probably a little 9th or 10th grader going into Melrose High School, and we had some tremendous high school athletes in that program at that time. So this is how I got my start with Memphis State University back in that time. That was during 1968 and 69.
We're talking about, I call him Uncle Larry and Larry Finch, and what he meant to the program. You've seen him as a player, you've seen him as a coach. Now the university has said that they're going to release a statue in a park in honor of his name. Can you talk a little bit? Well, if he was here, how do you think? Because Joe was your best friend, and you were very instrumental in his life. What would he say? How would he feel?
Well, if I would know Larry would be very elated about what's happening. As I told him earlier, that when the history of Memphis is written, Larry Finch's name is going to go down in the top 25 in Memphis history, along with the likes of Elvis, because what Larry meant to the university back at that time, when Memphis was more or less a divided city. The Larry Finch and Ronnie Robinson coming to the University of Memphis and subsequently started a winning basketball program where both black and white Memphis all related around that. And of course, it led to us playing Bill Walton and them in the Final Four, which really brought the city together. During basketball season is one of the things that really brought this city together. And that's where Larry became an integral part, because the kind of relationships that he had, where Memphis became one city during basketball season.
Right. Well, moving forward now, we're fast forward, over the time you've been around, 40 years of Memphis Tiger basketball. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can almost go a decade, a favorite moment, but if you had 2 favorite moments, in Tiger basketball, what would that be? What would those be?
Well, one of my favorite moments, I guess, was watching the NCAA tournament when Larry and him was coming along and playing the likes of Kansas State with Lon Kruger was a guard at Kansas State, and Larry Finch outscored Lon Kruger. Then we went along and we played South Carolina, which had Mike Donnelly, who's the coach at Tulane now, along with Kevin Joyce and Alex English. And then we went on to play Providence along with Ernie DeGario and Barnes. So those were some fine moments. But one of the proudest moments, I guess, would be when Larry became the head coach at the University of Memphis. And then my other proudest moment is watching Penny Hardaway take over this basketball program to see if we can't bring this program back to where it's supposed to be. Right. I've been around every coach that has been at the University of Memphis, starting with Mo Iver down to Gene Bartow, to Wayne Yates, to Larry, and then Coach Dick Price. And so I've been involved with all of the coaches that have been here, so everybody knows that I'm a junior #1 Tiger fan.
No doubt. And you kind of brought into our next point, you know, the favorite son, the other favorite son, Anthony Hardaway. You know, you was around when he was getting recruited. You was around when he played here. How, you know, I know, you know, you voiced your opinion heavily in support of him getting the job, and now he has it. You know, just give me your thoughts on that, just on him and this, you know, the team that he's built. Like I said, 'cause you're still heavily involved in the program. Just what are you thinking from Penny and some advice, you know, that you think Larry would give him?
Well, you know, he's got to go out and establish his own program, because Penny has a history. Young people know Penny, and most of the young people now can relate to Penny because it hadn't been too long since Penny quit playing. But then when you look back, this program has a history of a lot of fine basketball players. And my #1 guy too is Coach. I can't ever forget Keith Lee, because Keith and I still are very close, and we talk quite often. But all of these guys, even with Andre Turner here, I can remember us going out recruiting Andre Turner. But Penny's going to take this program to a different level. The only thing that I can say to the Memphis fans is that get out and support these kids. Get out and give you all our support. And I hope that the pressure, they don't put the kind of pressure on Penny in his first year. Give him time to build this program, and let's put us a winning tradition together. Because Memphis basketball, we do have a history. When you talk about Memphis State and University of Memphis, you're talking about the basketball program. But I'm also elated to see that the football program is on the upswing.
So this has been a big week for basketball recruiting so far. Sunday morning, Coach Penny Hardaway and the staff went in home with DJ Jeffries. And then Monday, they went in home with James Wiseman and Trendon Watford. And then Wednesday, they went in home with Matthew Hurt. So they've been traveling around the U.S. this week, getting in home with some of their big guys. So just a little bit about those guys. How does an in-home visit go from a guy that was recruited? How does an in-home visit go, and what's the dynamic of that? Man,
first, well, it's typically like when you let someone into your home, that means that you're interested in them, you know. And for, you know, first off, starting with DJ Jeffries, a guy who I had the privilege of coaching when he was in the 7th and 8th grade. You know, I'm super excited for DJ, but I'm more excited for Coach Hardaway and his staff and the city of Memphis. If we can, like I said, the guys that you named, if we can get these guys, the university is going to be amazing. I mean, it's going to be something that we hadn't seen in a long, long time. And it's just, you know, so getting in home is a big deal, especially for a coach to get in home, because you're able to sell your pitch, you're able to sell your program, you're able to get as intimately as you want with the family and with the student athlete.
You talked about it being an intimate setting, and it definitely is when a coach is coming into your home. But for these parents and for these kids that obviously know Penny Hardaway, Mike Miller, Sam Mitchell, what do you think it's like when those three guys walk into somebody's house? Like, what do you think a parent's reaction and a kid's reaction is when these guys that were superstars in the NBA and now they're coaches? What's that reaction?
I mean, if you want to get there, you said it, the NBA. That's every athlete's dream that plays basketball, to get to the NBA. You got 3 guys on that staff that have NBA ties, and you also have Tony Matlock, who played Division I. I mean, it's pretty much, it's unbelievable. You got Rodney Hamilton, who played Division I. So coming from this, the wisdom and the knowledge coming from their staff is pretty much self-explanatory. I mean, why not listen? It's one of those things. If you're not listening, then if I'm a student athlete and Penny Hardaway and his staff calls my phone, I'm listening, and I'm very interested.
So also this weekend, Jalen Green and R.J. Hampton, who are both 5-star guys in the class of 20, will be in Memphis for their first official visit. They're obviously both great talents, and they chose Memphis as their first visit. Yeah.
First.
So with Penny Hardaway getting those two guys as his first visits, what's the importance of that?
It's a testimony to his hard work. I'm a firm believer hard work pays off. You got the #1 player and the #2 player in the country, in my opinion, in R.J. Hampton and Jalen Green. R.J. is on the Under Armour circuit, which I had the privilege of working. He's just dynamic. He's a scorer. He can do everything. I've seen him run the point. If I'm not mistaken, he averaged 23 points on the circuit this year, with 4 or 5 assists. He's just a guy that he just does everything. I mean, he's a natural-born scorer. And then you get the exact same thing with his counterpart, Jalen Green, who they're very close friends, and they're coming together. And to be first, you always want to be first in anything. So getting those two guys at the exact same time is just it's testimony to hard work. And Jalen Green he's just unbelievable. I mean, he's the #1 player in the country by numerous websites. I mean, it's consensus. And just to have them on our campus, you'll hear me say this often, the Tiger Nation. If you see these guys out, let them know how much we want them. They can go anywhere in the country, but they're here in Memphis. They're coming here to talk to our staff and to talk to our team and to talk to our city. That's what we stand for. So, man, if you see these guys on their official visit, show them how much we want them and show them how much we appreciate them just even being here. That's the biggest thing. So the biggest importance is to give them the love. I think our facilities speak for itself, our staff speak for itself, the players speak for themselves. We play in the NBA arena. I mean, so our program is selling. Now we need the fan base to help us out a little bit. And, they've been instrumental in being great, so far. We just need to keep it going.
So an official visit is a big thing, like you said. It's very important to get that. So what should these guys be expecting on their official visit? They'll be here from Friday to Sunday, so they'll be here all weekend. What goes into an official visit, and what do those guys look forward to when they're coming on official visits? Man,
the coaching staff is going to, they're going to get to know these guys a little bit more. They have already known what they like and what their interests are. So you kind of put together, you roll out the red carpet for them. You roll out the red carpet for them and everything that you're able to do for them, in the legal setting, that's what you do. So they're going to get a great experience. I mean, the weather is pretty good right now. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. They'll get the experience in Memphis. And I think, man, the city and everybody being here right now with the excitement of the football program, we play Georgia State Friday, it's going to be tremendous. And these guys can just expect a great time from the University of Memphis.
For this week's prep segment, I just want to highlight the Lausanne and Whitehaven game that was last Friday night. I know we typically do an offensive defense, or where we both pick a player for player of the week, but this week I just feel like that game has to be highlighted. We highlighted it last week as the game of the week, and it lived up to every bit of that expectation. It was an incredible game. I know Lausanne jumped out to an early lead. Whitehaven battled back, got the game into overtime. And then once they got into overtime, Eric Gray kind of integrated that offense and really worked that offense, and Lausanne ended up coming up with the win. But Whitehaven obviously played an incredible game. That's a team that up to last Friday night had won 29 games in a row and was looking for their 30th. And Whitehaven fought them tooth and nail to the very end to almost get that victory. So shout out to both of those teams. They played an incredible game. There's stars all over the field last week. Both of those teams are loaded with talent, and it all came to show. So once again, just shout out to those teams. If you're not following those two teams this season, just stay up to date on them, because they both are loaded with talent, and they have incredible coaching staffs, and they have incredible players there. For this week's Q&A, I want to touch on 2 questions that have been asked pretty consistently over the past week and a half or so. A lot of people are starting to get concerned with Memphis's recruiting due to DJ Jeffries and Trenton Watford both of leaning a little, not necessarily leaning a little different, but getting some other teams involved pretty heavily. So I just kind of want to talk about Watford a little bit. He is a Birmingham kid, he's an Alabama kid. So obviously Alabama is his in-state school. I know a lot of people saw me crystal ball him to Alabama, but that's just how it's going right now. I've heard that their in-home visit with him went very well. I know Memphis went in-home with him on Monday, so obviously Memphis is still very much in the mix, but with Avery Johnson at Alabama pushing hard, obviously, for Watford, and Watford's a guy that's, he's a very family-oriented guy, so being close to home and his family being able to follow him is definitely going to be an important thing for Trenton Watford. So yes, Alabama is definitely in on him a little bit more now. They kind of let these other teams come in and sit back a little bit, but at this point they're really getting involved. Like I said, they got that in home with them, and that went very well. Alabama also has Kyra Lewis right now, so they've got a couple of good recruits for this class, and Avery Johnson knows that he's got to get some big guys to be successful at Alabama. So that's kind of the way it's going for Trent and Watford. Like I said, Memphis is still certainly in the mix. They're going to be pushing him till the end. That's obviously one of their big targets for their class in 19. And then also we've got a lot of questions about Toni Pollard. I know he hasn't had the biggest impact in the first 2 weeks against Mercer and against Navy. He was battling injury, as he came out and said earlier this week that he was a little nicked up, but he's feeling great now. Everything I've heard, Toni Pollard's all full systems go. Earlier this week in the media luncheon, he came out and kind of said, I was a little tight, and if you watched the game on the CBS broadcast last Saturday against Navy, you could see him on the bike trying to get a little loose. So Pollard's going to be fine. He's I'm sure he'll be more in the mix this week. Like you said, he's good to go. Coaches have said he's good to go. So. And that's just another dynamic playmaker that they can add, once he gets fully healthy and they think, he'll be ready to go. So, and Tony's a guy that's going to be in the slot a lot more this season, so you'll see him obviously still on jet sweeps, and any way they can integrate Toni Pollard in the offense, they're going to. But there's no holdups, there's no issues there. Pollard is healthy, he's fine, he's good to go. Against Georgia State this week, this could definitely be his breakout game. I mean, anytime he's playing in a game and getting consistent snaps in a game, Pollard could go off. He's also still looking for that, that next touchdown, the next kick return touchdown to tie the record. Any week could be that week. If he gets the ball, he's a threat to score any time. So I think Pollard will have a good week this week. There's nothing to worry about there. So that'll do it for this week, everybody. Thanks for watching. Big shout out to Mr. Leonard Draper Sr. for coming on the show and giving us all his Memphis basketball knowledge. Also, don't forget this Friday night, go check out Memphis vs. Georgia State. Should be in for a great game. Also, RJ Hampton, Jalen Green will be on campus this weekend. So if you happen to see them around the city, see them at the football game, just holler at them. Let them know that Memphis shows love and we're happy to have them here. But that'll do it for this week.
901 Shelby Drive, look alive, look alive.